We're talking about doing business in Africa. John, is it easy to do business in Africa, or is there a lot of red tape that sits in the way?
Well, in Africa, Jeremy, unlike the BRICS, where in the BRICS you're dealing typically with a homogeneous environment of a single federal government, single language most often, single currency, and the like. In Africa, you've got more than 4 dozen countries, 4 dozen or 52 or so jurisdictions, 52 customs, commercial practices, customs practices, tax legislation, licensing arrangements.
Okay, this is sounding very difficult to do business
so
in.
it is complex, and so you do need to cut through that complexity by focusing on a particular area, by taking people with knowledge of those areas and focusing on the particular market that one wants to be in. So, I often hear investors saying, we're going to open a business in Russia. I never hear an investor saying, I'm going to open a business in Africa, meaning that it'll be one business covering all of Africa. So the thing in Africa is you need to be specific to a jurisdiction, or at best to a region, the lake districts or the lake areas of East Africa, or Francophone West Africa, or Equatorial Africa, or Southern Africa. So there needs to be some specifics in this regard. The telecommunications market in Francophone West Africa would be a better definition of where to go. And when you made that decision, when the investor has made that decision, then the complexities can be narrowed down and addressed. So yes, it is complex. And that's why your homework has to be spot on.
Okay, so let's say now I own company A and I've got this product. It's a glass of water, and I want to sell glasses of water into Africa. Are you saying I would need to look at a specific area or a specific country and deal with the issues there?
Yes, exactly what I'm saying, Jeremy. You'd have to do it by country.
And in that case, would it be advisable for me, if let's say I'm going into Zambia to go and sell this glass of water, would it be advisable for me to get Zambian partners on board?
It would be highly advisable to get good knowledge of the Zambian market, including the current operators, what your competition would be. In other words, no different to any other arrangement in any other investment situation. And if having Zambian partners gives you that information or gives you better access in a competitive way to anyone else who's trying to sell that glass of water in Zambia, then that's the way to do it. In some jurisdictions, there's a legal requirement to have citizen directors in part or citizen ownership, and it's different in different jurisdictions. So it is complex. That's one of the complexities that can be cut through by employing people, advisors in your organization or elsewhere that can help you do it.
Where does corruption come into this? Because that's the constant word that comes up.
Yes, it's a truism in Africa. There is corruption in many parts of the world. It seems to be more endemic in Africa, and that's typical of a development continent or a development country. There are people who do take opportunities. There are people who abuse executive arrangements. There's no doubt about it. But corruption is a two-way street. There's an offerer and a giver on the one hand and a taker on the other hand. And so, you're absolutely right. It does happen. But we found at KPMG that those organizations that work with the national jurisdictions do better. It might take a bit longer, but it will do better. I can tell you of one retail organization that will never pay a bribe to a customs official at a border and has refused to do it, such that when their vehicle arrives, the customs people process the documents pretty quickly because there is no opportunity for a bribe, as they've learnt. So one has to stick to one's values in this and conduct business accordingly.
The political situation in Africa, as you've been using the word developing economies and developing countries, so there is a fluidity to doing business or investing in Africa. That surely is a risk.
Well, it is a development continent, and one has got to have different policies. and different approaches to a development state, a development area, than one would have in a mature market. There's no doubt about that. I don't think anyone would disagree on that. So it is acceptable, at expectation, that there'll be changes in policies as development happens. So I think that's an expectation which we shouldn't deny. As regulation happens, let's say, in a country in telecommunications or in broadcasting, that policy wasn't there 10 years ago, perhaps. It is there now. It's based on perhaps best practice in the rest of the world. So one should expect changes in policy of a development nature in all of these economies.
But surely that can also be of benefit to an investor who's going in, because you are then becoming part of shaping the policy that you're going to be in the environment that you're going to be working in.
Certainly, there are opportunities in change. The change doesn't deny opportunities, it changes opportunities. So a development state, development economy provides new opportunities. So if we think about the road that we were talking about earlier on, your ability to sell that glass of water in a particular place is improved by this road that has been built from a mine to a port. And that becomes an opportunity on a road that has been occasioned by a development state.
You were talking earlier about retailers. I think 3 of our retailers are already in Africa. The new Walmart deal, are they using this as their way of getting into Africa?
Yeah, I expect so. I mean, the public announcements are that one of the motivations for the acquisition has been that. So, that's public knowledge. Retailers are doing good, in my view, in that it is much easier to sell in a store locally produced materials, raw materials, whether it is fresh goods, fresh produce, or any other material that is built, assembled, available in country. Retailers don't wish to have long logistic lines from points of manufacture or warehouses to points of sale. Retailers would like to have as much of their shelves packed with locally produced material. So that is pretty good for retailers in distribution. Clearly, cost pressures, is it better to sell in your store a locally produced kettle or a kettle that no one can produce for the low price you might be able to import it from China? So you get these conundrums from time to time. Certainly on the fresh produce side, the retailers definitely wish to buy locally because it's fresh produce and it's available locally. It's support for the local market from that point of view. So it's politically savvy to do that thing as well.
So the more development we see in Africa, technically what you're saying is that the more it will uplift the entire continent because of local sourcing.
It provides greater employment, and as we all know, employment is the key to development in a country.
Now, we touched earlier on infrastructure, and I want to come back to that because one of the areas, and I've travelled fairly extensively through southern Africa, one of the areas that has always fascinated me is the downfall of the rail system throughout southern Africa. And the subsequent increase in usage of roads, which leads to a lot of damage to roads from big trucks. I've got a friend who has a trucking company in Johannesburg, and he sends trucks up to the DRC. And he said it can take 6 weeks to get your truck up and back, depending on the conditions of the roads and what the backlogs are at customs points and that. For Southern Africa, should SADC not be looking at putting together some sort of rail infrastructure which benefits everybody?
Oh, Jeremy, you're spot on. And there is such a project in the SADC countries. It's called the North-South Corridor, and it moves from Katanga province in DRC, which is a province with a treasure trove of minerals, all the way southwards through Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, South Africa. And it is a project for cooperation between those governments and international funding agencies to improve not just the road, but also the rail and the telecommunications, and for that matter, some water, north-south. Clearly, rolling stock must go north and south. They can't always go in the same direction. And so you're spot on, Jeremy, that there is such a project. It'll take some years, but it is already underway. For example, the Botswana government has already improved the road between Nata and Pandamatenga in northeast Botswana. Some people might say that's fortuitous in terms of that road always needed improvement, but it is a part and parcel of the jigsaw of a north-south corridor.
If you were going to invest in any single country in Africa, where would you be putting your money?
You're putting me on the spot, Jeremy.
You're right on the spot.
It depends what one's appetite is for risk.
Let's go big on risk.
Let's go big on risk.
Yeah.
I would find it difficult to choose between natural resources, mining, and retail and telecommunications. Those are my three hots for the moment. I think Africa has too little infrastructure in terms of internet, access to the internet, data transfer. It's improving with all the cables around Africa, so I think there's some upside there for volumes to improve and the number of cell phone users. I think the natural resources that are available in Africa, the world will need it when the Northern Hemisphere and consumers around the world start buying again. There'll be an increased demand for natural resources. So I think mining will be pretty good. And then for retail, I think there's going to be increased urbanization across Africa. We will see in a couple of decades, half of Africa will be urbanized. So that means people will be not subsistence farming or living in agricultural environments, which may be a pity because agriculture is a big employer of people. So I think urbanization, whatever services would be required as a result of that, would be good. Water, sanitation, retail, food. I think those are the upsides.
You bullish about Africa?
Absolutely. Not even a question about it. I think the development prospects will provide for fantastic business opportunities, for human development, for opportunities for previously denied individuals. We do need to get political leadership aligned and always in a development state with good reward for those who make investments. So yes, absolutely.